"You're lying, kiddo," he said, like he had not just said a sentence that changed every piece of leverage in Ohio. "You are letting it drag." I went back every Saturday through April. 4 Saturdays of quiet water, cold tea from a thermos, and the slow, deliberate work of learning a man in reverse. He gave me things in pieces, the way you feed a shy animal. A photograph of his mother with my cheekbones, a set of drawing pencils he had bought for my 16th birthday and never figured out how to give me, and the one story he had held back that first day on the deck. It happened in 2007, the spring I turned 18 and my college fund vanished. My father had found out, not through a hospital record, but through a contractor in Wheeling who had worked the Camden Valley build in '91 and had a long memory and a short temper during a contract dispute. My father had not confronted my mother. He had gone straight to Neil, brought the timeline, brought the dates, and laid them on the desk between them in the company trailer. He had offered Neil a choice that was not a choice. Silence and 40% of the company, or total destruction, a public paternity suit, a ruined reputation, and the immediate erasure of Chloe from the only life she had ever known. My mother had begged Neil to accept the terms. She was terrified of the public humiliation, but even more terrified of what my father would do to me if the truth broke while I was still under his roof. So Neil had signed over his voting rights, stepped away from the family, and quietly redirected his own personal savings through a lawyer to pay my tuition every single term under the name of a fake hardship fund. He had traded his presence in my life for my peace of mind, and my father had spent the next 17 years using that secret like a leash on both of them. Hearing it did not make me cry, but it turned whatever was left of my childhood softness into tempered steel. My father had not just neglected me because he was cold. He had punished me every single day for being another man's child while taking that man's money to build his empire. Every cold comment, every ignored report card, every time my sister was placed above me, it had all been a calculated, silent revenge against an innocent girl who did not even know why she was being hated. By early May, Neil's strength was visibly fading, his breath coming shorter during our walks down to the dock. On the second Saturday of the month, he handed me an accordion folder tied with black ribbon and told me it was time to talk to Hale again. Inside were 35 years of cancelled checks, tax filings, real estate transfers, and the original partnership agreement from 1984. Complete with an undisclosed clause regarding buyout valuations upon the death or total incapacity of a founding partner. 2 days later, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Martin Hale called my office at Hartwell Mutual. His voice was thick, missing all of its previous legal precision. Neil had passed away in his sleep at the cabin, looking out at the lake he had loved. I sat at my desk for 5 full minutes, staring at the rain against the window pane. Before I took a deep breath, packed my clipboard and my file into my leather bag, and walked out to my car. I did not shed a single tear until I pulled over at the edge of Seneca Lake, looking at the empty chair on the deck. The funeral was held on a dry, windy Friday afternoon in a small chapel near the water. My father showed up in a tailor-made navy suit, accompanied by my mother in black silk and Brianna in designer sunglasses, looking like they were attending a corporate acquisition rather than a memorial. They sat in the front row, holding court, receiving condolences from local businessmen who assumed Ray Owen was there out of loyalty to a fallen partner. They had no idea I was sitting 3 rows behind them, holding a black leather briefcase. When the service ended, my father turned and spotted me near the exit doors, his face immediately hardening into that familiar expression of disgust. He walked over, his shoes clicking loudly on the hardwood floor, with my mother floating nervously 2 steps behind him. He looked me up and down, taking in my plain dark dress and my quiet posture, and let out a short, dismissive breath before leaning in close so the lingering guests would not hear his words. "You still have a habit of showing up where you are not wanted, Chloe," he said, his voice dripping with authority. "If you think being here gets you $1 of what this company is about to become, you are even dumber than your mother was when she tried to hide you. You are nothing in this room, and you are nothing in my family." My mother flinched, her eyes dropping to the floor, but she said nothing, falling back on her lifelong native language of silence. I looked straight into my father's eyes, feeling absolute unwavering calm settle over my spine. I did not raise my voice. I did not show anger, and I did not flinch. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the clear plastic sleeve containing the tea-colored hospital bracelet, and held it up level with his tie. "Then we should probably let the estate lawyer explain what I am. Ray," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. "Because as of 9 o'clock this morning, the sale of Harmon Owen Builders to Crestline National is completely frozen. And you are about to explain to 80 board members why you sold 40% of a company you never actually owned." The color drained from my father's face so fast it looked like a physical blow, his mouth opening slightly as his eyes dropped to the typed numbers on the ancient hospital band. My mother let out a small, sharp gasp, her hand flying to her throat as she realized the 35-year-old secret had finally escaped a drawer. Before either of them could speak, Martin Hale stepped out from the chapel office, carrying a thick stack of blue-bound legal documents, and gestured toward the private conference room down the hall. The meeting lasted 2 hours, and it was the most procedural, satisfying destruction of a bully I have ever witnessed. Hale laid out Neil's updated estate plan, which had been executed 3 weeks prior with full medical certification of mental competency. Neil had not just left me his 40% share of the company, he had also documented the 17 years of extortion, proving that my father had illegally manipulated company distributions using coercion. Under Ohio law, the penalty for that fraud triggered an automatic buyout clause, forcing my father to forfeit half of his own equity directly to the estate. By the time Hale finished reading the final page, my father looked 20 years older, his hands trembling as he stared at the breakdown of numbers on the mahogany table. Brianna, who had spent her entire adult life preparing to inherit a $230 million empire, was sitting in the corner in utter silence, realizing that her title, her position, and her future were entirely dependent on the sister she had spent 35 years treating like leftover trash. My mother sat across from me, tears finally breaking through her practiced composure, looking at me not as a disappointment, but as the ghost of every choice she had been too afraid to make. She tried to reach across the table to touch my hand, her voice shaking as she whispered my name, but I simply pulled my hand back, laid my pen flat on the folder, and closed the file. Some damage is like water under a foundation. Once it sits long enough, you do not fix the house, you just walk away from the structure. I did not take over Harmon Owen Builders, nor did I allow my father to keep it. I authorized the sale to Crestline National 6 weeks later, using my majority voting control to push the deal through. But I structured the closing conditions to ensure my father was removed from the board with 0 severance, 0 public honors, and 0 legacy. When the final papers were signed, my father walked out of the corporate office in downtown Columbus with a check, but without the one thing he had spent his entire life building, his name on the building. I used my portion of the settlement to establish the Neil Harmon Foundation for Youth Education, funding full 4-year college scholarships for students who grow up in broken homes or complicated family situations. Every year, when the award letters go out, I sign them personally, making sure every single student knows that their worth is not determined by whose name is on their birth certificate or whose picture sits on a family refrigerator. I moved out of my apartment in Columbus 3 months ago and bought the brown cabin on Seneca Lake. Spending my evenings on the wooden deck as the sun drops low over the water. The new Adirondack chair sits right next to the old grey one, both of them worn by the wind now, both of them belonging exactly where they are. I still work with evidence every day, but I no longer use it to figure out what was broken in the past. I use it to protect what I am building for the future. If there is one thing 35 years of silence taught me, it is that you can let people tell whatever story they want about you for a long time. But paper, truth, and time always keep the real record. You do not need a seat at a family table that was built on lies, and you never have to ask for permission to hold space in a life that was always meant to be yours.